So before I get started on the webinar, we have a someone who has graciously offered and accepted to give a quick intro to herself. That we have Tanish Hollins here with us today. She's executive director of Californians for Safety and Justice. She was appointed by the governor to join our Flexible Assistance for Survivors Advisory Committee. So I'm going to give the floor to her and just give her a few minutes to introduce herself and tell us about what she does. Hi, Tanish.
Good morning, Danielle. Good morning, everyone. It's good to see 174 people logged in. I'm so excited to be with y'all this morning. Again, my name is Tanish Hollins. I'm the Executive Director of Californians for Safety and Justice. I'm also the State Director of Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice, which is a network of survivors. Nationally, we have over 200,000 members. Here in California, over 50,000 members. I'm also a survivor. I'm a native of San Francisco. This work is incredibly important, and this moment is historic, so I can't tell you how proud I am to be here joining Cal OES. I'm a member of the Flexible Cash Assistance Committee who's been working with Cal OES over the past year or so to help inform this process. And I want to talk a little bit about what inspired this legislation, AB 200, that produced what we have right now, this pilot program for flexible cash assistance. Like many survivors in my network, I'm a survivor that comes from a community that has been under-resourced for a very long time, and a community that is overrepresented by people who have been victims of crime and who have been directly impacted by the criminal justice system. Our network, Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice, has been working with survivors over the past 11 years, bringing them into conversations about how we improve public safety. During the pandemic, we saw a rise in certain types of crime, and we also saw the isolation and trauma of victims and survivors being a huge issue, as many of you, I'm sure, also experienced either directly or with serving folks. We also saw a lot about the narrative, about who is deserving of receiving support as a victim or survivor, who could be considered a victim or survivor, and learned a lot about the barriers that exist for victims and survivors when they are trying to access help. We know through surveying crime survivors over the past couple of years, data and research has shown us also from agencies like Victims Compensation that most people don't get access to victims compensation, especially if they are Black, Latinx, or non-white victims of color. They have multiple barriers to getting access to support. The timelines for folks to get support are extremely long. The processes that people have to go through are traumatic, especially if they are forced to cooperate with law enforcement. We saw all of these barriers showing up, not just during the pandemic, but in real time over the years as we've talked to survivors. And we understand that has a direct impact on public safety. We also know that in the conversation around safety, victims and survivors' voices are usually left out. They're brought in front of cameras when we're talking about crime and punishment, but not as often about the needs, the everyday needs of survivors and the barriers they face. And we took all that information into consideration over the last 11 years as we worked with many of you to expand rights and protections for victims and survivors and to increase resources. Our advocacy has helped in many ways. But when we got into the pandemic, we also saw those barriers happening in real time with cuts coming, and listening to our survivors knowing that people really needed immediate access to support. They also needed flexibility in how they could get that help. Unfortunately, so many of the programs are restrictive so that folks can't do things like relocate immediately, or there are caps on the amount of money that they may need to access so that they can get a hotel room or, find a new place to live. And they may have broader needs like repairing a car or childcare, mental health, things that unfortunately some of our existing programs, they make it more difficult to access. So we took all that into consideration in our advocacy, thinking about what would be needed to try to increase support and resources for survivors, but also improve safety. And this idea for flexible cash assistance is what informed what we have right now. Our organization was able to model this by giving small cash grants to survivor organizations in our network, just to demonstrate what it would be like if folks had flexible cash to work with. And we learned some really profound things. Basic needs were what people needed immediate assistance with: food, hotel rooms, money to relocate to safer neighborhoods or to safer home environments, burial assistance. Some folks who got burial assistance in the past didn't have enough money to buy a headstone for their loved ones. This money was able to support that. So when we gave flexible cash grants just to demonstrate, we learned a lot about what people's needs were and what it was like to remove a barrier. We heard from them directly how helpful it was to have the barrier removed, to not have to get a police report, to not have to go through a long, complicated process, but just to talk to someone who understood what was happening and listened to their needs around safety and was able to give them cash that was flexible enough for them to get to that safety quicker. So that is what inspired the advocacy for AB 200, which led to the resources that we now have for the Flexible Cash Grant pilot program. I want to just take a moment to thank Cal OES for being an incredible partner in listening to survivors, in working with us so closely to implement this program. You'll see a lot of thought put into the outline for what organizations need to submit, because we want to make sure that these resources are accessible to organizations and to partners who don't typically get access to this resource, and to communities that don't typically get access to this resource. I also want to thank all the Flexible Advisory Committee members who are diverse and from all over the state, who brought the needs of their communities into a conversation. We took a lot of consideration around language access, around the types of survivor experiences that we need to make sure are honored in this process. And so I'm really grateful and hope that as you all go through this process and learn more about this Flexible Cash Assistance Program, that you're inspired and excited about the ways that we're going to be able to help our community. I just want to wrap up by saying a couple things. Because this is a pilot, we are excited to learn with you all as a partner ourselves how effective and impactful this program really is when it comes to public safety. And the new stories that we'll be able to tell about how survivors are going to get help and what that means for all of us, not just for the people who are directly impacted. So we look forward to learning from you all as the quarters move forward on the ways that we're able to support our community through this pilot program. Thanks again to everyone who showed up to the call today, and to all of the committee partners who brought their thoughts and the voices of survivors to the front. And finally, a huge thank you to all of the survivors who have shared their stories, who have advocated with us, who have helped inform this legislation and this process up until this point. And I'm excited to see healing coming to our communities.
Thank you so much, Tanisha. I really appreciate the time that you took this morning to share that. And you're absolutely right. There's been a lot of work that's gone into this, so I'm excited to share that with everyone. So let's get started. So again, this is the Competitive Funding Opportunity webinar for the Flexible Assistance for Survivors Pilot Grant Program. And we're going to start. These are the things that we are going to discuss throughout the presentation. We're going to do a quick overview for what we and the Victim Services Branch do. And then we'll move on to the pilot grant program and the basics of what that program is. We'll also touch on our new Grant Central system. I wanted to say Grant Central Station. It's not station, it's system. And that is our new platform for everything grant related. So I'm excited to touch on that with you guys. And then we'll be touching on some of the competitive funding opportunity on some important points in there that we wanted to point out. And included in the CFO are required forms that we wanted to make sure that we touched on as well, because those are important but when you're applying for the program. And then we'll end with more questions and answers. So let's get started with the program with the VSB overview. This is our organizational chart with Cal OES. We, as you can see, are under the director, and under the director is us, and finance and administration is where grants management is housed. So I know a lot of people might hear Cal OES and think we're just emergency services such as natural disasters, but in grants management, we have a very robust victim and services branch with a lot of programs, as I'm sure most of you guys do know. In the Finance and Administration Directorate, there are three. There's administrative services and human resources, but we are grants management. And you can see us, victim services, right underneath the grants management umbrella, along with monitoring and grants processing, homeland security, and community resiliency, and LISTOs. And in victim services branch, there are 3 divisions, each division with 10 units. This program is going to be handled by the Family Justice Unit, which is where I am the Family Justice Unit Chief, and under myself, I have 6 grants analysts, and they're the ones who are going to be doing the bulk of the work. Once, all applications are received, they'll be assisting with the reading and rating and processing those grants throughout this process. Also in the criminal justice division, we have the law enforcement unit, victim witness, and prosecution unit. So at each unit has about 6 to 7 grants analysts, depending on how many programs are at each unit. The mission and goals of the Victim Services Branch is to provide financial and technical assistance and support to victim service providers in the state of California. We provide financial assistance by creating victim-centered programs that are trauma-informed. A lot of research and coordination with the funding source goes into creating a program, and Tanish touched on some of that earlier, and I'll be touching more on how this particular program was created in a minute. For our current subrecipients who receive funding from us, it is our job and our mission to provide prompt and consistent technical assistance. This can range from getting grant subawards fully executed to conducting performance assessments to ensure that everyone's fully compliant. And that goes into ensuring we are compliant with federal and state requirements. So conducting performance assessments and compliance reviews are just some of the ways that we ensure that California complies with all federal and state requirements. Before we dive into the FA program, I wanted to give you all a quick snapshot of the work we do here in VSB. In fiscal year 2022 to 23, we saw about 80 programs. And these programs range from victim witness programs to family justice center programs, domestic violence, sexual assault, chat, and many more programs. Spread throughout those 80 programs, we had approximately 1,200 executed grant subawards. And we break down those subawards down into the type of agencies that are the subrecipients for those subawards. So of the 1,200, about 72% are non-governmental, 25% are local governmental agencies, 2.1% tribal, and 1.6% state agencies. So we're going to get into the Flexible Assistance for Survivors pilot grant program. And it all started with Assembly Bill 200, as Tanish had mentioned. This bill established the Flexible Assistance for Survivors Grant Program to improve safety, healing, and financial stability for victim survivors of crime. It also established the advisory body or advisory committee, which is comprised of persons appointed by the governor, Speaker of the Assembly, and Senate President pro tempore. The 6 committee members worked collaboratively with Cal OES, as I'm sure some of you witnessed during our several meetings that we've had within the past year, to develop components and requirements for the Flexible Assistance for Survivors pilot grant program. The committee has worked really hard along with Cal OES to create a program that is flexible while still meeting the requirements of this bill. The 2022 State Budget Act was passed and appropriated $50 million for this one-time pilot grant program. And of that $50 million, $47.5 million is available to applicants of this program. At this time, these funds must be encumbered and expended by June 30th of 2026. Many of the program requirements are clearly stated in AB 200. We developed the program in close collaboration with the FAS Pilot Program Advisory Committee, including what is statutorily required and what we believe we will need to demonstrate the success of this program. We have outlined here the program requirements as it was outlined in the CFO, and I'll be going over in the next few slides the goals and purpose of this program and some definitions and eligibility requirements. The goal and purpose of the program is per AB 200 is here. As you can see there, this is straight language straight from the bill. And you can see that there's a lot of words here. There's a lot of information here. So we worked together with the advisory committee to slightly reword the language to be a little bit more clear and concise. So this is what the CFO language says. The purpose of the program is to improve safety and healing and financial stability for victim survivors of crime and their families through direct cash and financial assistance. The original language said direct cash assistance. However, chaptered this past September was Assembly Bill 179, which amended this language to allow organizations to distribute direct cash assistance funds to victims and survivors directly to the parent guardian of the victim survivor, or to a vendor or business to pay for an expense on behalf of the survivor. And this language is all in the CFO. So we can see in the red, we clarify that language to read cash or financial assistance. We will pivot and cover some important definitions and then get back to the goal and purpose of the program. These definitions are also outlined in the CFO, but they come directly from the AB 200. I want to point out that family members can be considered a victim if they suffered physical, sexual, or emotional harm as a result of a commission of a crime, just like a victim or survivor. That's the definition of a victim or survivor. This is determined by the individual, and no documentation is required to be able to prove that, to support that victimization. So for the longest time, this timeline, we have had a lot of TBDs on this, but now that we have released the CFO last Tuesday, October 15th, we have a little bit more defined dates here for you. So again, we released the CFO October 15th, and in collaboration with the FAS Advisory Committee, it was decided to give applicants up to 12 weeks to apply, which gives us a proposal due date of January 24th of 2025. And for the applicants that get awarded, the grant subaward performance period starts May 1st of 2025 and ends April 30th, 2026. We allow a lot of time in between the proposal due date and the performance period start date, because there's quite a process to be able to read and rate all applications fairly and then come to a funding decision before we can start the performance period. And then there's a process to get all grant subawards fully executed from there. Okay, so we are going to start with the Grant Central system. And you'll see the web address here at the bottom of the screen. I'm sure some of you guys are already familiar with the system, and if you are not, this will tell you kind of what it is that we do in the system, what we intend to do with the system, as it is still an ongoing development here, and kind of show you guys, navigate with you guys how to get into the system to kind of play around with it and get familiar with it. So we have been working very hard. Mostly Lee has been working very hard on this system for these reasons. One of the main reasons is to streamline all of our grants processing and grants management processes into one system, into one place. Um, as if you guys have received funds from us before, there was been several different forms and all these different processes. The intention of this is to get everything into one place, um, and utilize technology that we have um, today to be able to do it in less steps, and make it a lot more clear, um, to validate data that is input into the system, and eliminate all those extra steps to make sure that the data is correct. We hope to improve data collection. So progress reports and other data collection that is done throughout the grants processing and grants management process. We all intend to have that in the system. Some of those things are still being developed and perfected. But it's going to really change the way that we collect our data. Same with payments. Payments are now live in the system, I believe, or if not, I think they're going to be live. I know there's going to be another webinar next week to discuss that with the field. And that's going to change how we do things. It's going to make things a lot easier on the subrecipients as well as on our end, as far as eliminating, errors, and making it very clear the amount of funds that are available, the balances, and things like that. So those are the goals that for why we started this process to transfer over to this new Grant Central system, and it's really going to change for the better how we do things overall in grants management. So that web address that I gave you guys earlier, when you type that into your browser, it's going to bring you to this page here. Without needing to log in or register, you can still search for opportunities, opportunities that could be available to your agency by going to where this red arrow is, where it says opportunity search. Again, you don't need a login or anything to look at that. However, you will need a login if you choose to apply for any opportunities. So on this page, you'll see right under the login, there is a new user register here button. So you'll click on that and they'll give you there's a whole page of, registration information that they ask from you. But just keep in mind, once you register, that the confirmation of registration may take up to a few days to receive, but it is being worked on. I'm hoping as, everyone's getting into the system and there's not so many people going in at one time, it'll take less time. But that is where you go to register. And again, you need to register in order to apply for any of our programs. Once you are registered and you are successfully able to log in, this is your dashboard that will come up. You'll see there's lots of different tools and cool features that are available to you. But what I want to draw your attention to are the training materials. At the top right-hand corner, right next to your username, you'll see a little notebook. It's highlighted here in yellow. I don't think it's in yellow on the actual website, but that was just our way of making sure you could see that. And once you click on that, a little drop-down menu is going to come into view, and you'll see all these training videos for different guides. So I can't quite read it I have a smaller screen here in front of me, but training videos, I think, for filling out your program narrative, and just navigating the system in general. So if you are not familiar with this system, this might be helpful to you as you're trying to fill out an application. Okay, so we're getting into the good stuff. The competitive funding opportunity, also known as the CFO. So for each competitive funding opportunity, there is a program supplemental that is attached to it. So if you haven't already, when you go into GCS and you click on this funding opportunity, this document is going to be attached to the competitive funding opportunity. So this is the first page of that document. The first few pages are intended to give a high-level overview of the program. Although most of the eligibility sections and the program description will be highlighted in GCS itself. That used to be on the front page of these, but we have, again, migrated over to GCS, and we've changed the way that we've formatted these. So here on the first page, you have your contact information, and then we go right into the eligibility. Contact information is if you guys have any questions. Again, we can only answer technical questions about the process. Then there's that email, the FAS@caloes.ca.gov, that you guys can email. And there's also an email address for Grant Central System if you guys are having any like technical questions within GCS that we cannot help you with. Then you can go straight to that email address and they should be able to assist you. So wanted to touch on these definitions, what an applicant is and what a partner organization is, and why we have these two different entities here. So when developing this program, we wanted to make sure that this funding was accessible to all organizations. And because we know some organizations are doing amazing work, but don't necessarily have the infrastructure to administer a grant, we created a way for agencies to partner together to submit a proposal. So this could mean that a partner organization may have minimal resources to further the goals and objectives of this program, and they may want to partner with the applicant who may be a larger, more established. Again, they have to be a California community-based organization. So they can partner with them in order to administer this grant. And then they would operate this program under the applicant. So each applicant can have up to 4 partner organizations if they choose. If an applicant chooses to partner with a partner organization, then with the application, there is a required form. And again, we're going to go through that later on, but that does need to be determined in the eligibility verification and allocation determination form. So there is, I think it's a 2-page form that you are able to distinguish who you're partnering with. So who is the applicant and who are your partner organizations? Again, you can have up to 4, and then the appropriate people sign those forms, that form, and it is submitted with the application. The eligibility begins on the first page and continues on to page 2 and 3 of the CFO. You will see the information from the last slide here, and then we go into the eligibility to compete for funding. So that's where we are here. In order to compete, again, like I mentioned earlier, the applicant has to be a California community-based organization, and they have to be registered with the California DOJ's Registry of Charitable Funds with a current exempt or pending status. They must have a history of serving victims and survivors living in California or who are victimized in California. They must primarily serve victims or survivors. So this means basically the majority of the people in an organization or the project within the organization that will administer the grant, the majority of those people that they serve are survivors. And like I mentioned earlier, every application must submit a completed and signed eligibility verification and allocation determination form. And this is attachment A in the CFO. And like I said, it must be fully completed and attached with the completed application. And then for a proposal to be considered, they must receive at least 50% of the available points, 50% or more, in order to be considered for funding. And that's done during the reading and rating process. Once once we have gone through the reading and rating process, we determine who are the selected applicants for the program. Then those applicants will receive an intent to fund letter. And that tells the applicant that they have received the funding, but the following things need to be done in order for them to officially receive funding from Cal OES. First being that they need to be registered and have a current, exempt, or pending status with the California DOJ Registry of Charitable Trusts, and that needs to be done within 60 days of receiving the intent to fund letter. And then they must have a current registration on the IRS tax exempt organization website. And we included the links for you guys to easily go in and check that and make sure that you have the correct statuses. And again, these must be done within 60 days of receiving funding. So for funding information, important to know for this program, all subrecipients are eligible to request a one-time advance of up to 25% of the total project costs. Again, it's just a one-time advance. After that, all payments will be on a reimbursement basis. And this is going to be done in GCS using our payment tool in there. Since this is state general funds, there is no match requirement. So it's just straight state general funds. And then subrecipients must use no less than 90% to provide flexible cash and financial assistance to victims and survivors. We have given it specific language in the CFO to show how to instruct how to show that when you're doing your budget during the application process. We tell you which specific budget cost category to select to show that. And then no more than 10% of funds for expenses can be used to administer the grant subaward. And again, we tell you the specific budget cost category to select in GCS for this as well. So again, no more than 10% can be used for administrative costs. So like salaries or any administrative costs cannot be used beyond the 10% of the total project cost. And finally, the grant subaward performance period is May 1st, 2025 to April 30th of 2026, based on the availability of funds. So we get to the tiers, and I know I saw a lot of questions about this, so I hope I can answer these questions for you. So to ensure like-sized organizations are competing against only each other, we have created 5 different tiers here, as you will see. 20% of the available funding, so 20% of $47.5 million will be allocated to each of the 5 tiers. So that's where we came up with the maximum allocation here. Funding not needed to support eligible proposals for a specific tier. For example, not enough proposals were received in any particular tier. Those remaining funds will be redistributed equally among the remaining tiers. So when looking at this, the applicant or partner organizations must indicate the tier that they qualify for in the eligibility verification and allocation determination form. On the form, there's this exact same chart on there, and there's check boxes next to each of the tiers. So you'll simply just check next to whichever tier that your agency qualifies for. And this is based on the number of victims and survivors served in fiscal year 22-23. Once a tier is determined, then the applicant can then apply up to the amount of that chosen tier. So for example, if you have determined, you looked at your data from fiscal year 22-23, and you saw about 220 victims and survivors that fiscal year, then your agency is able to apply for up to $400,000. And lastly, we are going to go over the required forms. So I know I have mentioned the eligibility verification allocation determination form, and this is attachment A. The other required upload that you will have to upload is the preference points verification form. And this form, it applies to the applicant or partner organization, and you complete it based on what best answers that question. Some questions on there, believe there's 5. Some questions on there may not apply to you, and you will just simply reply on somewhere in there, NA. There's instructions on those forms to follow that. This form is a rated form. You'll see a rating section under each question, and then at the very end. So the reading raters will be rating that form and including it in the overall score for the entire application. And I'm going to show you where to find these forms here. So this is a view of inside of an application. This one has not been started, but to find these forms, you'll see on the left-hand side, you're going to find these forms under program narrative. And you scroll all the way down, and it's going to be at the very bottom of that page. So you'll see required document number 1 and required document number 2, and there's going to be those browse fields where you can drag and drop or upload those forms straight into there. As you can see on the left-hand side, you see application information. There's a checkbox there. That means that section is complete. And then you see contact information and program narrative. They have a little exclamation mark. That means it needs some attention. There's an error message on those pages, and you need to address those error message before you can submit this application. When you can submit an application, all these boxes here should be checked on the left-hand side. And that means that you have everything in there. It doesn't analyze any information for you. It just means that it's completed in the application. And if there are error message, you'll see it in the top right-hand corner, and it'll tell you exactly what it is that is missing or is wrong. Well, I really appreciate everyone taking the time to join us on this webinar. I hope we answered your questions. We appreciate your interest in this program. And like I said, we'll have everything posted hopefully in the next few weeks. We will be hosting 2 other webinars. The dates for those are not yet determined, but those will be posted to our listserv just like this one was. So you should be notified when those webinars are scheduled. All right. Well, thank you so much again for joining us, and I hope everyone has a great weekend. Take care, everybody.